Welcome back to the Man in Progress podcast. I am incredibly excited to have with me Mike Sagun, which I asked Mike, how do you say your last name? And Mike was doing the really nice thing. He was doing the really polite thing of like, hey, here's the American way that you can say this name. I was like, dude, how do you actually pronounce it? So hopefully I did it some justice. Mike, dude, so
You
happy to
did,
have you on
man.
the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Will.
Dude, I'm incredibly excited, man. I was telling, I've told on previous episodes of how I just kind of was in this world of searching for other men who are doing great work, who are trying to help men in the community better understand themselves with vulnerability and all these kinds of things. And you popped up and jumped out at me with your Instagram content. And I was like, dude, if I get a chance to talk to this guy, I'm gonna be super, super excited. Uh,
Mm,
you've been able to work with all kinds of brands, different companies. I'm so excited to have you here. If someone is not familiar with you, Mike, and I know they heard the bio, but what would you describe kind of what you do right now? If someone would be like on the street, Mike, hey, like, what do you do? What do you do for a living?
yeah, I love that question, man. That's such a great question. It's like that's like such a common question for guys, and like guys to go straight to like, let's go to the LinkedIn profile and here's my resume, you know. And but what I like is that I help men create safe spaces to think deeply about
Mhm.
themselves and to live authentically. And in other words, I'm a men's coach, a men's work facilitator. I lead retreats. And the foundation of my work is helping men slow down so they can get reconnected with themselves and other people. And that looks different for so many people. So again, reconnected with their authentic selves, their hearts, their souls, but also getting reconnected with their purpose and what they want in their life.
Yeah, dude, I love it, and I'm with that in mind. Why do this work? Like, what even led you on this path of doing this? I mean, I get a sense it wasn't like you woke up on one day and were like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm doing men's work. Like maybe
You're
maybe
right,
that's the
man.
case, but I feel like there's probably I would love to know. Like I was reading your story, I was reading things like on your website and doing this, and I was just kind of like, like Mike's got an awesome story, but what actually led you down this path for yourself to go through this?
Yeah, yeah. So I was lucky, man. I didn't really grow up. My father was around, but my father wasn't the father that I needed, or he didn't play the role of father that I needed. But I was lucky to have other men in my life, other adult men in my life that took me in, that shepherded me, that took me under the wing. And I had several of those in my life, in my younger adult life. And one of them in particular, his name is Kevin Lassett, who's still a deep, deep friend of mine. He was a high school teacher, turned into a mentor. He was the first man in my life that held me while I cried and said it was okay. He was the first man that I came out to and said, I'm so proud of you. And so he's been a part of my life for almost 20 years. But this man, I basically followed in his footsteps. He was an educator. He was in theater, and he was helping young people make healthier decisions in their life. And I like basically just followed his path in my career. And I was working for a large corporation doing educational theater in the Bay Area. And what we basically traveled all around Northern California, and we put on these huge theater productions to teach communities to make healthier decisions in their life. And I did that for 10 years. And about the 7-year mark into my career, I started to feel unfulfilled
Hmm.
and dissatisfied with what I was doing. Like the outcome of the work that we were doing was very powerful. We were doing very important work in the community, but I was starting to lose the energy that I
Yeah,
got from it. Um,
yeah.
doesn't mean that the work wasn't important. The work was still important. And so I started to think like, what's next for me? And there was this almost like a light bulb moment. I was working with a young person. She was 12 years old. And what we would do is we would put on these shows and we would have these one-on-ones with young people, and they could talk to us about anything that they wanted, right? So they could,
Cool.
anything that was happening in their life. And we created that safe container for these young people to just express.
Hmm.
And I was working with this young girl, and she was in the middle school, and she was maybe 12 or 13. And she confided in me that she had been a victim of rape for the last 7 years since she was like basically 3 years old,
Gosh.
and by her uncle, and something just shook me in that. I had seen in my career with this organization, I'd seen many rape victims. I've seen many victims of abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, also suicidal attempts. But for some reason, this young girl really impacted me. And me, myself, as a sexual abuse survivor, it really resonated with me because mine wasn't just an isolated incident, just like hers. It happened over a span of time.
Yeah.
And so something clicked in my heart, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, why am I the first adult to hear about this? Why hasn't this young person talked to anyone else about what is happening in her life? She is endangered, and no one has been there to help her. And she's never gone and talked to anyone. She sees teachers every single day. She has adults around her every single day. And yet, in the last 7 years that she has been a victim of rape, I am the first person to hear about this. And it shook me, man. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? And where are the adults at?
Right.
And so, and that's kind of like, that was the catalyst to trying to figure out what was next for me in my life. At that very moment, I thought, I have a higher purpose to serve. And so I found coaching, and I went through coaching school, and I got certified through Coaches Training Institute. And it was while I was in my coach's certification program, I had my own master coach, and she basically was like, what is your next purpose, man? Like, what do you want to do with your life? And I thought it was a silly exercise. Like, I didn't really believe in like purpose statements. And so she coached me basically to craft this purpose statement. And I landed on, I create safe spaces for men to think deeply about themselves and to live authentically. And I was like, oh my God, that is my purpose.
Damn.
And in this time, I was reading a lot about men's mental health. So there was a lot of data at the time that was coming out about loneliness in America, how loneliness is an epidemic in America, how it's more dangerous than suicide and smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I also read that the highest demographic of suicides in America are committed by men ages 45 to 65. And that again shook me. And so I found my purpose, man. I was like, dude, where are all the men at? Why aren't there more men out there doing this deep inner work so that they can help that young girl, right? So that young girl can find other adults in their life to get help, right? And so that led me through this journey of men's work. And here I am today, man.
Dude, thank you for sharing that story. I'm glad I asked. I would have never known that's what kind of sparked the path. And just my heart goes out to that girl, and I'm glad that you were at a place where you could create space for her to open up about that, because who knows if you weren't, what maybe could have kept going. And
Absolutely, man. Do you know that saying, hurt people hurt people?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I also like to say healed people heal people.
Heal people. I love that. I love that.
Right. And
Yeah.
so it's like part of this journey for me is about healing men.
Yeah.
So that those men can heal those deep and dark parts of themselves so they can help heal others.
Yeah. Oh man, I want to, okay, I have a follow-up question for that, but I forgot that I've been starting this out with asking a couple questions that just for context and out of personal interest. Mike, how old are you?
I'm 32.
32.
Turning 33 next month, baby.
Hey, I just turned
Yeah.
33 in January, so I got a couple
What's
months
up, 87, baby?
What up, 87, man?
Yeah.
It's dude. I like to ask this question because I've been spending a lot of time thinking, and I'm single at 33, living in a bigger city and near Washington, D.C., and I've had a lot of thinking of like, where am I at in my life? Where do I feel like I should be? And going through all these expectations and maybe the social norms of where I should be. And I've really been enjoying asking this question to guys to start off the interview. And I totally blanked is, so you're a guy who people on the outside might look at and be like, man, Mike's got it all figured out. Look, he's able to live in a different country. He's in shape. He's got all these things going on. He's working these places. And what I found has been really interesting. I've been asking people this, like, do you ever stop and like, does it ever worry you, or do you ever think about, or has it ever in the past caught you where you spend time going, where should I be in life? Am I where I need to be? Like, am I even on the path that I thought I should be on? Are you ever comparing yourself? Like, do you have those emotions, or has that ever played a role in your life?
Never, ever, never, ever, ever have I ever had that emotion. No, man. No, man. I mean, I think,
Uh,
you know, what's in this work that, this deep personal work and anyone's work is being able to feel enough in this time, like right now, in this moment. Like maybe you're not where you need to be or you want to be in life, monetarily, whatever you define success. But success is just what I believe success is being content with the now, with right
yeah,
now. Doesn't mean that I can't set goals for myself. It doesn't mean that I can't look ahead 5 years, 10 years and say, this is where I want to be and this is how much money I want to be making. Doesn't mean
yeah,
that. But it can almost become a vicious cycle to constantly be striving for the next thing.
mm,
Like what is after this? What's going on? And I know this because that is my life, right? It's like I get
mm,
caught up in that, brother. Like,
yeah,
yes, I have a fucking deep meditation practice. Yes, I do a breathwork practice, and I observe my thoughts, and I am able to see these insecurities and the comparisons and all these things. But still, that's still the work. I'm
yeah,
still a human.
yeah,
There still comes days where I'm like, damn, like, is this the right thing for me to do right
yeah,
now?
yeah,
And like the thing is like I'm also trying to reconstruct the conditioning that I've had as a young boy, right? Where my parents were saying, you know, this is what it means to be a successful adult. You stay at a company for 10 plus years, you get a 401k, you go through college and you get a partner. Well, they said wife, and I'm gay, so I didn't have a wife. You buy a house, and then you work for 30 years, and then you retire, and then you live your life in your 60s on retirement, right? And that's like an American dream, you
yeah,
know. And so I still find times where I'm like, I need to break that apart. And that's not my life. That's not the life that I want. That's not the life that I'm building right now. But those insecurities still seep in of like, am I doing enough?
mm,
Is
mm,
this it? Especially as an entrepreneur, man, it's like I set my days, I set my schedules, and you know, so much of success in America is tied to money. But as an entrepreneur, you're not fucking making money every single day.
yeah,
Sometimes that comes in chunks, you know, and so
yeah,
like, you know, at the end of the week, you're like, dang, did I make any money this week? And was I successful? And there's times where at the end of the week, I'm like, I didn't make any money this week, but does that mean I'm unsuccessful? Right? Did
mm,
I do enough? And so
yeah,
there's this, there's this ability or this training that I have of like observing what, observing what my worthiness in all of
mm,
this, you
yeah,
know? And so, yeah, man, like I don't think it's uncommon for men to constantly think like, am I doing enough? And I
yeah,
also don't think it's uncommon for men to find worthiness in different identities outside of outside of who they are as men. And what I mean by that is like, it's not uncommon for men to find identities in work, in their families, in their hobbies, in all these external things,
yeah,
right? And so, um, yeah, I mean, it's but this is the power of doing some deep work is being able to observe, look at those, pull those apart, unearth them
mm,
from the core of who you are, and look at them and say, okay, cool, yeah, that is a piece of me, that is a part of me, but it doesn't always have to define who I am. Like my identity tied to success or monetary worth doesn't always have to be me.
mm,
It's me right now, but maybe that could be different later, or maybe I need to figure out what my true worthiness is in my life. Does that make
yeah.
sense?
It makes total sense. Yeah, for me, it's been so fun to ask that question to people, because I think everyone has their own way of interpreting it, and I think what's really cool is, you know, like there's no answer, you know, there's no right or wrong answer. Just I think what's cool is I hope that someone hears that and goes, it gives me permission to feel okay, like, and feel okay with where I'm at now, and that there's room to grow, and I don't need to beat myself up and constantly sit here in comparison when everybody's doing it, and we're all feeling
Yeah.
these things, and it doesn't matter where you're at. And I really wanted to go back to you were talking earlier about how you create safe spaces for men, and it really got me thinking. Have you seen in your work, Mike, like, and I know it's very individually based, but have you come to any beliefs about why men struggle so much to create safe spaces for both
Mm,
themselves and for other people?
that's such a great question, and like we can go broad with this, right?
Yeah.
I think it's like it's kind of difficult to answer that question without making like generalizations
How
sometimes. You
about,
know
what
what I
if we
mean?
start with this, Mike? What if we start with, do you feel like you had a safe space when you were growing up? And if you did, how that developed over time? Were you even aware of it? And if not, when did you start to feel like you were finding the safe space for yourself?
Yeah, that's actually part of the thread of my purpose is that, you know, I found a mentor. I
Mm,
found several mentors growing up, and they're all men, and one of them in particular, Kevin, created that safe space for me.
yeah.
He taught me what it was like for another man to hold another man and let them just be. And I don't. I feel like so many men have mentors, but men sometimes I don't think mentors have the capacity to teach what emotional safety looks like.
Yeah.
And what I mean by emotional safety is like, how do you create an environment for another man to allow themselves to experience what it means to be a man and what it means to be human, to express, to feel, to let emotions overwhelm them. And I think, you know, I think so many men, I'm going to retract that. I think I think men find mentors in athletics if they're in sports. I think men who find mentors in athletics, there's a culture of you know, locker room talk,
Yeah.
and it's different, right? It's like you can totally look up to a coach, and they definitely have value in teaching principles and structure and discipline, which I think is very valuable for a man. But on the other side, to balance that, we need to also be taught how to carry our emotions and how to hold our emotions and how to not just stuff it down, but also to express and feel and to overwhelm. And so we also have a tendency as men to want to fix things,
Mm,
right? We have a
mm,
tendency to be like, I have the solution for that. I'm a problem solver. I know how to, I've gone through that situation before in anything. And so why don't you do this, right? Why don't, like, I've done this. So here's the equation to your problem. And if you don't do it, then it's your fault. And we have a tendency to sit in that space. And I think we have a tendency to do that because um, we were never taught to just listen.
mm,
And I think listening is a huge component to emotional safety and to creating those safe spaces for men. And I mean, really listening, right? Not just like thinking about what's next or thinking about what you can say to rebut or thinking about the solution, but really listening to a man's words and on letting those words impact you,
mm,
letting those words make you feel a physical sensation. Um, when I'm in a space with a man and he's sharing deeply and vulnerably, I got this from my buddy Devin Fredrickson, who's a men's coach too. But I get truth bumps, right? I get like goosebumps on my arms, and like I could
yeah.
feel the impact that it has on me, and that is from just allowing myself to just be present
Mm,
and with the man, be
yeah.
present here with the person. And I think that is one of the greatest gifts that you could give anyone, is just creating that space of listening and creating that space to just be.
Mm,
You know?
yeah. Do you mind, Mike, filling us in maybe giving us an insight into maybe your daily practices? I think that there's a lot of men who probably are listening to this and heard what you said and are like, man, I wish I could do that. I wish I could feel vulnerably, and I wish I could feel
Mm,
like and have those sensations. And I think that my guess is a lot of them, including myself, and I know in my past for sure, would be like, yeah, it sounds great, Mike. Like, or, you know, I would love to do this, but one, is it something that can be learned, like, oh, just read a book and here it is? Or are there things that you practice? Like, how have you gotten to a place where you're able to receive that so openly and freely? Do you practice that daily? Is it something like you reach a certain state and you're like, yep, got it, good, it's always here?
Mm,
How
yeah.
do you help someone evolve into a place where they can start to practice those things and feel that way?
It's a daily practice, right? But I think it starts with figuring out like what it is, like what's important about being more vulnerable to you,
Mm,
right? Do you seek relationships outside of the relationships that you have that seem deeper than yours? Do you see relationships that look fulfilling? Do you feel unfulfilled in your relationships? Do you feel unfulfilled with yourself? And the first step is just exploring and becoming aware of what those things are,
yeah,
right? What is my responsibility in this? What is my responsibility in not creating those deep connections with people? And I will say that like um, there are we so I facilitate retreats with EVRYMAN, which is a men's organization based in the
yeah,
United States.
yeah,
And so often we get guys, and I also facilitate men's groups, and we'll get into that. But we often see guys who are like, I'm not sure if this is what I want. I don't know if I want to go to this men's retreat, but I know that there's something missing in my life. And I also know that I want to grow. I'm not quite sure what that looks like yet. And they come to a men's group or they come to a men's retreat. And by the end of the weekend or by the end of the group, their hearts are just broken wide open. They're like, oh my God, this is what it feels like to feel. This is what it feels like to be me. And I think so often when we don't give ourselves an opportunity to feel, we don't know that feeling. We don't know what it feels to be sad. We don't know what it feels to be truly angry and have rage. We don't know what it feels to have joy in our lives. And in these spaces and in my one-on-one coaching at these retreats and these men's groups, we give guys permission to just feel, to
yeah,
just allow their bodies to respond to the emotions that are coming up. And that is a practice, right? That is a practice. It is a daily practice. Vulnerability is what I believe vulnerability is courage and strength. But I also believe that vulnerability is allowing ourselves to be impacted by other people. So that could be a practice in itself. Having conversations with people and hearing something vulnerable and allowing that to hit you and allowing that to like reverberate through your body. You can practice. You could practice your emotional capacity, your emotional awareness by watching movies and
mm,
watching movies that really impacting you and allowing yourself to be impacted by the story,
mm,
right? Allowing yourself, like if there's a very deep or sensitive moment happening in the story or in the plot and you feel something and maybe your reaction is just to stuff it down, or maybe your reaction is to laugh because you're uncomfortable.
mm,
Notice it and shift the experience and notice what's actually happening in your body. And so uh, oftentimes when I was younger, I would watch movies and be severely impacted by it, but I would shut it down. I would put up
mm,
a wall and not allow myself to feel. And even to this day in my 30s, I still watch movies and sometimes I can feel the wall come up when I
yeah,
feel impacted by a movie, right? And so we could use these external sources to help us access these emotions. Music is a beautiful way to access our emotions, to access joy, sadness, excitement, energy, whatever it is, but allowing your body to move with that is practice as well. But also conversations, right? Conversations like you and I are having, and asking tough questions, going deeper, asking tough questions to yourself and asking tough questions to other guys in your life or other people in your life. It's a daily practice. And I'm constantly practicing this every day,
yeah,
right? And so like on a practical level, like what you can do is you could join a men's group. EVRYMAN has men's groups all over the world. You could go to a men's retreat. Right now we're on pause because of the coronavirus. But once this thing is eradicated, we're going to relaunch all our retreats.
yeah,
You can hire a men's coach, right? A man that will help you access these emotions. I will say that when we develop the emotional capacity, it impacts and ripples in every part of our life. It benefits every single part of our life.
I, man, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. I look at the men in my life. and so much I think stems from how you grew up and the things you carry around from your family and childhood. And I guess I'd love to ask you that, like when you're working with people, and especially men, how do you help them work through some of that deep, like rooted conditioning that's going on in
Mhm.
there? Like I think as men, like even when I was starting to become aware of my feelings and how I was feeling, I mean, there were just layers and layers of conditioning of shut that down. Like go find something else. Go put your energy into achieving something or a different task.
Yeah.
Have you found that a lot of men still struggle or carrying things from when they were kids or when they were growing up and from what they experienced to the people around them of what they were conditioned to, how they were conditioned to act and behave?
Yeah, man, I still that happens with me, right? Like I like I think about my parents and I think about my
Yeah.
upbringing. I'm like, oh dang, that's why I do that, huh? Or that's why I say
Yeah.
that, or that's the way, that's why I think that way. No, the work that I do is really, it's the important, the depth of my work ranges from uh, breath work to finding our values, to finding our purpose, but it's also based in going deep into inner child work,
Yeah.
right? Revisiting that inner child in us, and what was that inner child missing? What was your younger self missing?
Yeah.
And what does that inner child need? How does that inner child need to heal?
Mm. Mm.
And like therapy, coaching are really incredible ways to deepen that understanding. But the work can start by yourself.
Mm.
And that can look like just observing, if your parents are still around or your family members are still around, the people that raised you, observe how they move through this world, observe the way that the things that they say, their values, observe the way that even their mannerisms, like how they carry themselves in the world, observe how they communicate with people, observe how they communicate with you, and start linking those parts of yourself with them. And these could be the qualities of yourself that need improvement. These also could be the qualities of yourself that you really love and honor. I went and visited my dad in the Philippines, and it was so incredible. One, my father and I never really had a great relationship growing up. We never had a close connected relationship. So my intention in this trip to visit him in the Philippines was to reconnect with him, but also to figure out a little bit more about myself and why I do the things that I do. And
Yeah.
I spent a week and a half with him. And it was the first time in our life that we've spent that much time together. And it was beautiful because he acted as a mirror for me, man, right?
Mm.
I got to observe my father. I got to observe when he got irritable, when he got angry. I got to observe his values and the things that he would say to people. I got to observe how he interacted with strangers or how he interacted with family members. And so often as I was observing him, there was always this place in my heart that went, oh my God, I do that. Holy cow, that's me. Or, oh my gosh, I react that way.
Mm.
Right. And so like I got to see that, like I got to see my impatience, I got to see my irritability, I got to see my anger, I got to see like all these different qualities that I'm working on and want to improve in my father in a week and a half. But I also got to see in my father how caring he is, how loving he is, how charismatic he is, how warm and welcoming he is. I got to see all like the spectrum of who I am as a person in my father. And it was just such a beautiful, beautiful observation. And from there, then I could do different work, right? Then I could observe them and say, oh, great, like here's this irritability that's coming up. Where did I learn that? I learned that from my dad, because when my dad gets irritable, this is how he responds. And look at me, I'm responding like this right now. Holy cow, okay, cool. Let me take a deep breath. Let me make a different choice.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, yeah, man, like a lot of the work that a lot of the, like when we see things that's not like working for our lives, we can totally trace that back to how we were brought up as kids.
Yeah.
Right. Like we look, especially in relationships, like if you have a pattern in your relationships,
Mm.
if you're a pattern of dating people or seeing people that you think in the beginning is like, this is the perfect person that I need. And then all of a sudden something happens. Like one, you got to take responsibility for that.
Mm.
Like there's no pointing fingers in those, but also look back at like, what were the adults relationships like in your life growing up, right?
Yeah.
Like, where did you learn this from? Where did you learn these values and relationships? And how is that impacting you as a person as you enter these
Yeah.
relationships? And this is scary work, you know?
Yeah.
It's scary, scary work. And we confront ourselves.
Mm.
I used the mirror analogy earlier because it's a powerful analogy. When you look in the mirror, what do you see,
Mm.
and what do you choose not to
Yeah.
see, right? And like when you can look at the things that you have chosen not to see, then you can start to see the patterns in your life that weren't working for you or still aren't working for
Mm.
you. And then it's beautiful because then you could just look at what you need to change or what you want to do differently.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say that it's easy, and I'm not going to say that it's not painful, because it is painful.
Yeah.
Right. But we're beating our ego down. We're saying you don't control my life anymore. Right now, what we want to do is we want to be more authentic to our heart and step out of our heads and back into our bodies and into our hearts so that we can create real change in our lives.
Man, I think what you said is so powerful. One, so many things jumped out at me. One, seeing your dad as a mirror, and I've been noticing that more and more as I'm getting older, and seeing them more as a person, and not my dad or my mom, but as a human, right? Just another person who's lived life and who just has more years on me, and they're still trying to figure out themselves, and how I can see how them trying to figure out the ways their strategies have been passed on to me, how I'm mirroring so much of that. So that jumped out to me big time. And two, just you're right, the difficulty of the work, and it's, I think for a lot of men, it's easier to run or just avoid or deny instead of actually facing that. And I
Yeah,
really,
maybe that's we develop those masks, right?
right,
We
totally.
develop those masks, so we feel hard emotions, and we become the joker, or we become like the bravado, or we become like the arrogance comes up, or even we isolate, or we like push away, or we run away, or we fight. Like we put on all these masks to not sit with some of the things that come up, the hard parts of our lives, the hard parts of our stories that we need to deal with, that we need to confront. And I think I mean, this is totally a theory of mine, but I think we see a lot of guys in ages between 45 and 65 committing suicide because they've never had the opportunity to explore these dark parts of themselves in a safe way.
Duh.
And all their lives have been told that this is not how you're supposed to act, and you need to figure it out yourself. And if you're not figuring it out yourself, then you're not a man. You're weak. If you can't fix your own problem, then you're not a man. You're weak.
Yeah.
And then that forces us into isolation, because we get insecure about our thoughts, and how we present ourselves to the world, and how our perceptions of other people of us. And so then the only choice that we think to end the suffering is to just end our lives. And that's what's devastating, right? But this is why we are in this work. This is why you and I are in this work,
Yeah.
is because I'm speaking for you, but this is why I'm in this work,
Yeah.
because I want to help men heal. I want to help men, approach the darkness, and develop a friendship with the
Yeah.
darkness in themselves, right? Become best friends with that darkness, so that you can learn how to step more into the light. You can step more into who you are as a man, and
Mm.
then you could serve your true higher purpose. You could serve who you want to be and the people
Yeah.
around you.
Man, I'm grateful. I'm just so grateful. This journey that I'm on of finding people like you, Mike, who are doing this kind of work is just so cool to see that that there is a space. There's space out there, and there's this willingness for other people to open up space. And uh, I want to be respectful of your time. I've got a few more questions I would love to ask you.
Yeah, let's do it.
One that I'm super interested in. It's going to be kind of broad, and we haven't prepped for this. So if you're listening, don't worry. If I haven't given Mike much time to think about any of these. But Mike, how let's say 10 years ago, how would you say you were at giving love and receiving love? Like, how open were you to receiving love, and how do you feel like you gave love a decade ago?
Beautiful, beautiful question, man. Yes, 10 years ago, I wasn't out yet.
Mm.
I was still closeted. Um, I've always been a man of service. So I've always been a man to like help people, to serve people, to
Is that one of your love
listen.
languages?
So my personal love language
Yeah.
is I need to retake the test, but
Yeah.
5 years ago it was it's been words of affirmation.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Me too.
uh, but I think part of it comes from being a Filipino, and our culture. We're very hospitable. as a
Yeah.
culture. We love to serve. We love to feed people. We love to take people in. We love to, you know, we love to take care of people. It's so ingrained in our DNA. And so, and I also grew up in the church. And so part of the church was like, we constantly serve, right? We constantly being a beacon and being a source to help people. And so 10 years ago, I was constantly, the way that I showed love was I helped and I served and I volunteered and I sat with friends and I listened and I helped people out. But I was also robbing that time away from my own personal work, my own journey, right? I kind of used it as, a defense
Mm.
so that people wouldn't want to pry into my life. And so I had friends, and I still do have friends who would come to me when they needed to talk or they were going through a struggle or a challenge. And I would be open to that and accept it, but I would always accept it because it was a way for me to block what I was going through so that they wouldn't ask me what I was going through.
Yeah.
And so the way that I receive love is by people just honoring me,
Yeah.
right? By thanking me for being there for them, by thanking me for my service. So yeah, man, that's a really great question.
Yeah. How has that changed to today? Has it changed at all? Do you find that, you know, your openness to receiving love is any different, or your ability or the way that you give love has changed at all? Or do you feel like it's just
Absolutely, man.
transformed? Yeah.
No, totally. It totally has. Yeah. I mean, I think as if you're listening out there and you consider yourself an empath, or if you don't know that you're an empath, like you get highly impacted by other people's emotions, or you could step into a room and you could feel the energy of the room. Like, I just want to say that you're normal, and like people feel that.
Yeah.
But myself as an empath, because I derive so much, I'm an extrovert too. So I derive so much energy from being with people, but I also was absorbing all these emotions. And when I would absorb these emotions, I thought I had to fix it. So I was constantly trying to fix things, trying to constantly like be there for people.
Yeah.
But it would drain me.
Yeah.
It would make me feel exhausted. And I was also like, I used it as a way for me, like I said earlier, to like avoid what was happening in my own internal dialogue, my own personal heart. And so I have learned to set boundaries in my life,
Yeah.
right? Like I need to set boundaries in my relationships. And I've also had to cut people out of my life. Like if you are not giving me energy, if I feel like I'm constantly being exhausted by this relationship, then my boundary and I've set a boundary and still I'm exhausted in this relationship, then I need to choose for my own health and my emotional health. I need to cut this relationship off. And, you know,
Mm.
as an extrovert and growing up as an extrovert, I found a lot of validation in how many people I knew or how many people I hung out with. But it was taking a toll on my emotional health. But I really love this analogy of like, if your life is a tree and all your branches are your networks of friends. If you want to grow a bigger and stronger trunk and a stronger root system, you got to start pruning these
Mm.
branches. You got to start pruning these leaves, right? You got to start pruning the dead parts of this tree so that you can grow a stronger trunk. And that's what I've been doing these last 10 years. I've basically just been pruning,
Yeah.
right? Not to say that I don't love these people that were in my life, right? Not to say that I don't still cherish what we had, but I have evolved into a different phase of my life and a different person. And so I've set these boundaries of who I want in my life and who's going to provide me energy at an equal level, right? I can give the energy and they can give the energy back. And that's it. That is what is fulfilling to me. That's what a relationship is when both people feel like they're equals in the relationship.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's uh, I just, yeah, I think we evolve so much as humans, as men, and to hear how you've changed it's cool to hear. So thank you for,
Yeah, man. I mean, like if you like, yeah, like Jim Rohn says, like you are the reflection of the top 5 people that you hang out with,
yeah,
right? You are the reflection of the people that you hang out with. And if you don't like that reflection, find new friends, right? Find a
Yeah.
new community. And right, like if you aren't changing your community, you're not changing,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
so like there are people that still like they have had and cherish, like there's loyalty in relationships, and I believe that it's really beautiful. But if you're not growing in those relationships, if you're not growing in those communities, it might be time for you to find a new community to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, it's, man, such a great point, and something that I think, oh man, we'll have to, maybe we could do a whole nother episode on that, because I think I totally agree with you. And I think there's a big fear, especially guys who have been around their same group of friends for decades, of how do you break that piece of your identity? Even if you know that that's what you need to do, there's a struggle in that pull. But uh, man, that could be an entire episode on how do you break it
Yeah.
from that. I want to ask just two more questions, Mike. One, what do you hope Mike 10 years from now is focused on? And what is what is the path that he's on? What is he putting his energy towards 10 years from now?
Hmm. That's a great question, man. I mean, monetarily, I'm not sure what that looks like, but I know in 10 years from now, what's going to be the same is healthy relationships, beautiful, down, vulnerable, connected relationships. There's fulfillment that's going to continue. There's satisfaction that's going to continue. 10 years from now, I'm not sure where I'm going to be physically in this
Yeah.
space, but but I know that I will be doing powerful work. And I'm not sure if it's men's work, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's like, if I'm still going to be here, I might find another purpose from now.
Yeah.
Right. And, but I'm okay with that. I'm totally fine with that. What I do know is that I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to have a loving relationship with my husband. I'm going to have healthy relationships and a healthy community around me. I'm going to feel satisfaction. I'm going to feel fulfillment.
Love it. I love it. And then my last question for you is, let's say you're on a stage at a elementary school or middle school stage, and they've asked you to present, and a young kid, a young boy who's like 10 years old stands up and he raises his hand, has a question, says, Mr. Mike, what makes a man?
That's a really great, oh my gosh, good questions. Well, uh,
Mike?
I would say that a man is a human that gives themselves permission to live the human experience, which means they allow themselves and give themselves permission to feel every single emotion that comes up. They lead with their heart, but also they are assertive and get what they want. And they also are empathetic, compassionate, and loving. And a man is a man who doesn't always know what they need, but is curious about what that need is. And so I think a man is always curious about how they can be better.
I love that. I love that. That's an awesome answer, dude. I really want to. I've been telling people this, that I would really, my hope is to take everyone's answer from that question, turn it into a book that we can get out to kids and young men, just so they can see what different versions of what people think a man looks like in today's world. Because I think it'd be way different than what it was in the 60s or even 80s of what makes a man. And but Mike, I want to say first off, just I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and I would
Yeah,
love to
man.
absolutely interview you again. I want to be respectful of your time, and I want to just say thank you so much for even being willing to do this and to be on the show.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Thanks for having me. It's been great to connect with you
Dude,
virtually.
dude, you too, especially during this crazy time. Well, like we
Yeah.
said, we're recording this in, I don't know if I don't even feel comfortable saying peak. I don't even know. We're in early stages of the coronavirus situation going on. And, but Mike, I do want to give you a chance. And there's probably guys out there right now listening to this, maybe even women as well. You're like, wow, I really jive with Mike. I really, I want to connect with Mike. Mike, do you mind filling us in a little bit on, one, where people can find out about you, and two, the kind of work that you do with people?
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder of The Unshakable Man. I've co-founded it with my brother, one of my best friends, Chris Wilson. And we are a men's coaching practice. And we do one-on-one coaching. We do offer a few spaces for women that do really connect and resonate with our work. So if you identify as female and you want to, and you're curious about this work, you can contact us. But we do serve every person that identifies as male.
Mm.
If you're listening out there, you identify as with Mel and you're curious about coaching, you can find us at www.unshakableman.me. You can sign up for our newsletter for men, where we launch a newsletter every month, especially curated for guys out there who are interested in learning new perspectives and what it means to be a man. We have the Unshakable Man Facebook group. It's a private group where we share stories, challenges, experiences. We also find community in men. And you could also listen to our podcast, the Unshakable Man podcast. You can find it at unshakableman.me/iTunes or /Spotify. And that is an incredible space to just learn a little bit more about men's work and hear stories from guys in our communities, but also it's an opportunity for you to do some deep inner work. We provide lessons and tools and tips and exercises so that you can learn how to be a different man, be a better man. And so you can also contact me on Instagram. I'm Mike.Sagun, Sagun. And you can find us at The Unshakable Man on Instagram as well.
Dude, I just want to say, guys, if you're listening to this, I've listened to, I believe, the last 4, if not 5 episodes of the Unshakable Man podcast, and they've been amazing. Like an incredible place to just feel like connect. I felt like I was just sitting in the room with you, Mike, and at times it was Chris on the show, and it was absolutely just awesome. So if you guys are tuning into this, please go follow Mike, keep up with him and the Unshakable Man. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. You can keep up with us at Man in Progress Podcast on Instagram, and we will catch you guys on the next episode.